Hello, and thank you for joining us for Dr. Dav Knows All the Things. This week's episode is an audio version only, and this is from a recent podcast where Dr. Dav and I were guests. We hope you enjoy this episode. Thank you so much for joining us.
My name is Rick Shields, and I'm your host. My guests today are Dr. Bryan and Laura Davenport. Now, who they are and what they do are really entwined. They serve as lead pastors at Heritage Church in Vancouver, Washington. It's not a job or a profession for them. They're fulfilling the call of God on their lives. They don't do that by being pastors. They accomplish that by serving as pastors. And serving is at the very heart of all they do. The Davenports are the parents of 4 children, Benjamin, Emily, Maxwell, and Spencer. We're currently in a series called Hard Seasons, and we're discussing the challenging times people have encountered, hoping to understand how they are managing some of those difficulties and even learning from some who've been able to emerge onto the other side. When their oldest child, Benjamin, was just 7 years old, he was diagnosed with a degenerative neuromuscular disease that would be life-limiting. Perhaps I should restate that. They learned while Benjamin's life would not be measured by the number of years, it would have no limit upon the impact of his life. In April 2024, at the age of 25, Benjamin fulfilled all the days ordained for him that were written in God's book before he was ever conceived, and his address changed from Vancouver, Washington, to his eternal home in heaven with Jesus. Bryan and Laura, I'm so sorry for your loss and so happy for all that Benjamin has gained. Thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having us.
Let's begin with what you'd like people to know about your son, Ben, as a person, not Ben, the person with the condition.
That would take a long time. Ben was just the best. He exuded love for his family, for Christ, tender heart. Even in his own maybe struggles throughout his life, had such compassion for others. Yeah, just the very best person. He was our favorite firstborn.
When someone has a significant observable condition, it's normal to really associate them as having that, or that's the thing that sort of defines them, and then other things are also true about them. Well, first of all, Benjamin's condition wasn't obvious to the world. Even after his diagnosis, it wasn't that obvious. You had to kind of know. Even when he first started using a little red scooter to drive around longer distances, I remember people would stare at us, not meanly, but they would stare. I could see them thinking, why is that kid driving that around? You know, he looks whatever. He was small, which was good for him because of his body wasn't designed to carry a lot of weight anyway. But even when, of course, he began to use permanently a motorized wheelchair scooter, I don't know. I guess strangers would say, oh, your son's in a chair. They might say stuff like that. But if you would have listened to Ben's memorial service, all people talked about was his strength and his courage, and not like, oh, poor kid, he was really strong, but no, like they felt really loved by him.
Yeah,
and safe with him. And he was my best friend, my absolute best friend, my buddy, and was wise like his sister, but wise beyond his years. And I could talk with him about anything, and he would engage me with theology and Bible and Star Wars. I mean, that didn't matter. We had a blast. And he was just strong and smart and sweet.
Yeah.
And happy and hilarious. Mm-hmm. And also had a wheelchair.
Yeah. And when I say our favorite, I mean our families, not as like favoritism in children, but he literally was all of our favorite in the house.
Yeah.
For all those reasons that Dav just said and more.
When you look back over Ben's life and his journey with this degenerative neuromuscular disease, what were some of the hardest moments for you as parents?
Well, I think probably there were ebbs and flows of hard moments. The very beginning, I would first say probably was the first hardest. Just hearing the news and then being introduced to that world. You know, there were a lot of, not hospital visits, but doctor visits and tests, and having to kind of weigh how much do we want to be involved in that world of the medical system and how much do we want to protect our peace. So at the beginning, that was one of the first hardest. And then maybe for me, I'll say whenever there was a new symptom or something that maybe he couldn't do anymore, just having to come to that realization.
Yeah. Like the lore of Superman was, as he grew up under the light of the yellow sun, he slowly became stronger, slowly discovered new powers and stuff like that. That lore would be, my son was still super, but the older he got, he said, what was the hardest thing? Number one, even as a little guy, watching him struggle. Because he was never, that was the thing, is even if he was relatively healthy and functional, he was just not quick or strong. He just wasn't. The disease made his body gentle and fragile almost. And what that beget was in our family was a gentleness in our home. And there still is, even though my boys are huge now, and I talk to them a little bit when they get a little bit ornery, but there's still a prevailing culture of gentleness in our home, even how we communicate with each other, treat each other. And that was really, Ben was the catalyst of that. But the hard part was watching him struggle, and when he didn't know why, we didn't tell him right away. Watching him struggle, like a little guy trying to get his shoes on, or a little guy trying to put his seatbelt on and not knowing why it was harder. As Laura's right. And then as he grew up into his later teens, as the diagnosis progressed, watching him slowly losing ability to do even smaller things and kind of having to give up things that he enjoyed.
Yeah.
That was hard. And then toward the very end, he loved to play video games in his room. He loved it with his brothers. He got to a point where he couldn't sit and play video games. And even his writing, he had to use dictation for the last couple months, I suppose. And so watching him just lose small things that he enjoyed, it was hard. I'm not a fatalist or determinist, but somehow I still think like somewhere in the mercy of God, we do look back and say he was able to live almost fully without losing every joy.
Yeah.
It wasn't a sustained life of massive pain and loss of all other joyful interactions.
Yeah.
But he still was able to enjoy watching movies and stuff. But that was the hard part, was just watching, you could say that, watching the progression of the disease attack him. That was hard.
I was going to ask here, was there a particular season where the weight of this became especially heavy? But that's like asked and answered right there. So
it would be like standing at the tide of the ocean. You guys in Oklahoma don't have an ocean, but if you can imagine standing at the tide, and if you stand there long enough, the tide comes in heavy and then it goes back out. And there were days where almost it was inconceivable, unrecognizable symptom. There was just so much jocularity and just raw fun and peace. Lots of trips to Disneyland that were great. And even if he was on a scooter, it was still hilarious and fun. And the Lord, however that anyone might hear this, I don't mean to sound self-serving, but again, in the gracious providence of God, his dad's pretty strong.
And his mom.
Well, yeah. So the hard things, like the traveling in and out of a minivan and down the freeway into a hotel, in and out of Disneyland lines. Someone said, "Are you going to carry him, or what's his mode of transportation?" I'd say, "I am. Don't worry about it."
Yeah.
And it was never an issue. And Ben knew it from the bottom of his heart. He knew his daddy had him.
Yeah.
And she's absolutely right. His mom is very strong. And when I wasn't home or wasn't around, Lori also could hoist him in and out of his bed or his chair and in and out of the car, and it wasn't even a problem.
Yeah.
Laura, do you know you were strong?
I didn't until it happened. Yeah. But then it became strong.
When did you realize it at some point and say, I'm stronger than I thought I was?
More for me, it was, I never wanted Ben to feel a burden ever.
Yeah.
And he never did. Because I never wanted him to, I just made the decision, I'm doing this, whether it hurt or not, because he needed it. And so, yeah, I definitely didn't realize. And I did come to a point, I don't know when I realized I probably need to lift weights and stay strong so that I could be there and be present for him.
You're tough.
Well, he thought so, that's for sure. And that's what mattered.
I just want to reiterate that you decided you needed to be strong, but it wasn't like you had a choice, but you also didn't want the choice.
Right.
And then you would do things. You lift heavy weights.
Yeah, I told him I came to a point where I decided, okay, I need to stay.
And even if she hurt herself, she would will it away. If something hurt, I could see her going, nope, I'm not having, and it was all about Ben. And she would literally will away a sore hip or a sore back, or, she broke her toe once and that was bad. But, I fractured my sternum. And
Not because of Ben.
Not because of Ben. I dropped a weight on my sternum once, and I did it twice, but that was last year. But the first time I did it, I fractured my sternum. The thing I couldn't do was lift my son for weeks, and it was all her. Yeah, that was crazy.
Yeah. For like clarity's sake, because there may be parents out there that are in the same thing. Like that was everything. In and out of bed, using the restroom, all the things, because he wasn't mobile at that time.
Yeah, he was in ambulatory in that respect by late teens. Yeah. We had a dear, the truth is he was an associate pastor. He was first of us, my student at the university. Then he came to work for me, a 6'6" Marine. He and his wife met our son kind of when they came to visit, and they kind of hit it off. Part of his job was tech. He ran the sound booth and stuff, and Ben could do that. So they would hang out in the sound booth. Ben would run sound with him and stuff. Long story short, Jeremy started coming over on Thursdays just to have lunch with Ben. That was his lunch day with Ben. He'd hang out with Ben. And they became a mix of close friends. I can't say brothers because I think we sort of called him Uncle Jeremy. But I mean, if we went out of town, it was okay. We called Jeremy, and Jeremy and his wife Kara would come over, and they'd stay with the kids, and they'd have a blast. And they'd play video games, and he would do every kind of thing. Help Benjamin get dressed, in and out of bed, help him in the bathroom, all the kinds that you don't want to have someone help you do in the bathroom. He'd have to do, pull his britches up, and there was never awkward. They were dear friends to the last minute with deep respect.
Yeah.
And in that light, when I had to carry my son out of my house to the hearse, the only other person that knew he had passed at that time, I called the Marine. Had him walk next to me.
You two are the lead pastors of the Pentecostal church.
Well, yeah.
Not only do you pray for the sick, you anoint them with oil.
Yeah.
You pray for and you believe with them for their healing.
Yeah.
In any of the years leading up to Ben's going to be with Jesus or even afterwards, did you ever feel a sense of where did we go wrong, or what did we do wrong, or did we do enough?
My first doctorate, the application was the study of ministering, healing, and deliverance. Because my thing was I want to know everything that there is to know or has been studied or claimed about how to help people. And so the end result was a thing called helping the hurting. And it actually does help people. The basic theology and practice behind it has helped a lot of people. And we've seen, I mean, as you have, incredible, inexplicable things the Lord has done for people. And Ben was there during those things. And the thing about Ben was, and I told this to our friend Phil Taylor, he said, well, what do you do when you see the Lord heal somebody else? And I would say gratitude is the only thing that lets us eat off of other people's plate. So when there would be breakthrough or something neat that would happen, we would rejoice and we would give thanks. And honestly, nobody was more tickled about somebody's breakthrough or healing or miracle than Ben. And so we would use that, we would give thanks, and then we would pray again. And I think, to be honest, and Mrs. Dav can answer for herself, but also, Rick, I think, to be honest, you know how you're walking along down a road or somewhere and you can see a giant hole and you think, I better walk around that. I'm not going to step in that. That question of, oh my, did I do enough? Did I do enough? I see it. I see it as a question that could haunt me, but I realize that there's no recovering from that hole. So I walk around it the best I can.
Yeah. Yeah. I would agree.
I still tell the family in our family group text on occasion, I'm sorry, Dad failed. I tried. I tried to save him, And that sounds a little dramatic, but I'm just being vulnerable with my family,
What does God's faithfulness look like now? After your loss, when the miracle you prayed for and waited for didn't come the way you hoped?
I think for me, I'm still unpacking a lot of that. It's still very fresh. And not that the Lord hasn't been faithful, but for me, sometimes it's hard to see in the grief. When that is, I on purpose think about the ways that he has been. And even, I think I want to say this, someone might either judge it or feel seen. Even this conversation, having this with you, and we're, for the most part, composed. It's not fake, but there's still, how do I say it to not sound dramatic, but
don't just say,
like there's still a dying on the inside.
Yeah.
There's still, I'm sometimes barely holding it together, but I still choose to trust in the Lord, trust in his faithfulness, know he's good, choosing to know he still has good.
Okay. The psalmist said, and you and I grew up calling it the valley of death, which is not inaccurate, but it's really the valley of darkest gloom. That would be the fuller translation of yea, though I walk. So the psalmist said, even when I walk through the valley of the darkest gloom. By the way, I say this because I happen to be speaking along with our church. I'm very grateful that the psalmist said that even though he had a shepherd and the shepherd did all these things, that when he found himself in the darkest valley, it wasn't because the shepherd left him or he left the shepherd. He didn't blame anybody, but it was part of his journey. Okay, so I'm here in the valley of darkest gloom. Then he says, I fear no evil, for you are with me. And usually we talk about growing up, preaching about, we still have, even in the darkest times, we are comforted by the presence of God. I'm sure that's true. But the passage says, I fear no evil, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. So as I tried to look that up the best I could, I really did personalize it. And I thought, well, it could mean this, so I'm deciding that it means this for me. Here's what I feel. I'm in the valley of the darkest gloom. I fear no evil, you're with me. But it's dark. I don't see or feel the shepherd. I'm numb. I don't have that wonderful sense of, I had a discipleship question about how I feel the presence of God, and I got a low score, and the guy was worried about me. And I said, no, I'm not spiritually dead. I'm just really, really sad. But the rest of it says your rod and your staff. And as I looked at that and how the rod and the staff was used, basically, it's in this valley of gloom, what we have been aware of is God's presence, his protection, and his provision have showed up time and again.
Yeah.
And this is a longer story. It would be a whole nother story, but it has to do with Lord of the Rings, the Tree of Gondor, and all of these things, my son. But we sent him out of the house wearing his favorite shirt was the Tree of Gondor. Because he said to his mom, he said, Mom, if I had a shirt like that, I'd never take it off. Because you know, Mom, what it means? You know what it means, moms? You know what it means? It means he's coming back. You know that when the white Tree of Gondor blooms, it means the king has returned. And so he said, Mom, I'd never take that shirt off because it means he's coming back. He loved Jesus so much. And so that was his favorite shirt. So I carried him out of the house wearing that shirt. And then 4 hours later, the man who would become my son-in-law, before he said a word to what would be his new brothers, he was laying hands on them and praying for them. Emily's boyfriend at the time. And on his arm is tattooed the Tree of Gondor. Now, I'm just saying that God just little things. And when you said, how do you see God's faithfulness, Rick, when you asked me that question, my youngest boy was across the room. And all I wanted to say was right there. I have a son who lost his best friend and still goes to church early so he can serve, and still reads his Bible, and still sings from the top of his lungs during worship. So that's how I see God's faithfulness.
It's really good.
As pastors, did this season challenge or reshape your understanding of God?
It was a very long season, you know.
Well, you're still in this season.
Yeah. It started with the diagnosis, and he was a little guy.
And we were pastoring.
And so my first thing was, how am I supposed to respond? What's my paradigm here? What's the template of response here? It was an honest searching of Scripture, and as the two of us. And later, it could be better understood. I didn't articulate it at the time, but love hopes all things, believes all things, bears all things. Love never fails, which means love never quits. We decided we were going to hope all things, bear all things, believe all things, and never quit.
Yeah.
And that was our approach. And that was his approach. He would tell me, as I would be helping him on and off the potty onto his chair, and he'd be telling me, you know, Dad, I look forward to when I have my own kids and we go do this and that. And he'd tell me about how he wanted to raise his kids and how he was thankful for our culture and how he wanted to pass that on. And one of the last things he did was, again, he was pretty small, and that was Providence because he was not a heavy kid, thank God. The last thing he did was he bought himself a pair of shoes. He hadn't worn shoes since he was a teenager, a young teenager. He didn't walk, and shoes were uncomfortable and heavy and cumbersome, so he just wore socks. But he said, Dad, and I don't know if he told us or whether they just showed up.
They showed up and then he told us.
They showed up, these gorgeous brown size 11. I don't even wear 11. I wear 10. He's got small feet. And he these gorgeous brown size 11 dress shoes he ordered. And he put them on he had two desks, one for games, one for school. and he put them on one of his desks so we could look at them every day. Now, I'm sure, as we said, there are some of our ministerial colleagues that would love that. That'd be a good shout fest. And he didn't do it just for shouting. He did it because he said, Dad, I plan to wear those. And you know what? All we ever said was, okay, buddy, now I wear them. I wore them Sunday. And I wear them, and I sometimes tell people I'm wearing them because I've got big shoes to fill.
Yeah.
I would say, and I don't want to speak overly for Laura, because the 24 hours of his passing were, I think, touched by heaven in a very unique way. We have a Saturday night service, and he had been, long story short, he just preferred to sleep in. And so we decided, you can go to Saturday night church, and then you can sleep in on Sunday, and we'll get you up when we get home from church. And he acquiesced, fine. He liked church. But he said, okay, Dad, we'll try that. So he came to Saturday night church. It was his last service. And I happened to be, and he had wonderful times with his mom before that.
Yeah. Little moments where at the time I didn't recognize their significance, but then in hindsight, very, very significant.
He asked for a powdered donut. He hadn't asked for one for years.
Oh
So he said, should I have a powdered donut? And then as soon as he had it,
He got real emotional, so cute at church, because we have powdered donuts at church, and he hasn't had one. I think it's been 10 years if it's been. And I was like, sure, bud. Because also during that time, especially leading up to that time, he hadn't really been eating very much. And so I was here for him wanting a powdered donut. So I fed him a powdered donut, and then he put it in his mouth, and he was so cute because he kind of got all emotional. He goes, Mom,
he got tearful.
tearful. And he's like, Mom, I think he even said it's like nostalgic. He was just taken back from when he was a little guy and his papa would bring him powdered donuts, and he just got real tender about it.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh,
overwhelmed.
That's great.
Yeah, it's crazy. It was just,
And his pops had passed away just 2 years prior. So he was just sensitive and emotional about just this donut.
and that might seem insignificant, but when we look back, we think, oh my word, all this was happening. He has this nostalgic moment with powdered donuts with his mommy about his past and his childhood, and the joy, essentially saying all he remembered was joy, joy of his childhood. And then he comes to church, and during worship, one of the senior saints told me later on, she said, I was watching your son worship on Saturday night, and I was watching his face, and she said, his face was shining. She said, I really thought he was going to be translated right there. I thought he was going up during worship. People love to watch him worship. Then that night, Rick, I happened to be in Philippians. I happened to land on the Christ hymn in chapter 2. That celebrates both the magnificent glory and the virtuous humility of Christ. And my son would agree with me during church. As I said, he was my best friend, and he was smart. He had got his degree, his undergraduate degree in ministry leadership, and he was studying theology, and he was a Bible boy from day one. So he would agree with me in church. On occasion, I could hear him say yes, or he would laugh out loud. I could hear him in there. That particular Saturday night was crazy. The more I preached on the glory of Jesus and the humility of Christ, the louder my son got, to the point where I paused in the pulpit and looked over at him like, what is going on with this kid?
I did too.
What is he, amped up?
I kind of looked over at him like, Bub.
She was like, take it easy.
But
everybody else was loving it. We did not love it, but he'd never been that vocal.
Much.
And the thing was, I was just preaching about Jesus, and he loved every minute of it, shouting me down. He went home that night, had a special meal with his mom, but before I got home from church. That next morning, in the middle of the night, he texted me in the middle of the night saying he had a super bad headache. And I went downstairs. I could hear him saying, get out of here, get out of here. And I thought, was he mad at his dog? What's going on? I opened the door and I said, what are you yelling at? He said, I've got this headache and I'm commanding it to leave. I said, okay, son. Okay, great. All right, let's do that. I said, well, let me get some ice. And so I put some ice on his head, and his mom comes stumbling down the stairs. We kind of had a rule that if he texts us at 3 a.m, it better be for a good reason. Because he was kind of princess in the pea. If he was even mildly uncomfortable, he'd want us to fix him. And we're good friends. I'd say, knock it off. Just go to sleep,
Yeah.
So I'd say, all right, son, listen, it's 3 a.m. His mom's like, look, it's 3 a.m. I'm going back to bed. We got church in the morning. He says, okay. Normally, I would have joined her. I'd have said, later, bub, good night. Don't text me again, razzing him. But I stayed. I said, just a minute, son. So I got some ice, I put it on his neck, and we began to sing together. I sang, the steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. And he sang with me. Mercies never come to an end. And then my son, a very charismatic boy, both of us just began to sing in the Spirit together. Probably for, 10 minutes. Quietly together, till finally he said, that's it, Dad, I feel better. I'll see you in the morning. I came downstairs. I got him up to use the restroom to put him back to bed before church. And then his mom came home after church. He was awake, talking to her, jibber jabbering a little bit. But as I pulled out of the parking lot, I knew that's the thing. As far as the faithfulness of God, many people probably might take exception to this, but I was pulling out of our church parking lot on my way to go somewhere else after church, and I heard in my hearer this sentence: "You're going to get a phone call from Laura. You need to take it. This is it." And I said kind of out loud, "I can't do that. I'm going to be teaching in class. I can't answer the phone. That's ridiculous." I dismissed the thought. The thought came again, and it was, "No, the phone is going to ring before class starts." I was about to go teach another class. "The phone's going to ring before class starts. You need to take this call. This is it." I pull into the parking lot of where I'm going. My son, my middle boy, jumps out, runs off to get in there. I look over and my phone rings in my truck. And I look at the phone and it's Laura. I take a breath, I answer it, and she says, "Babe, something's not quite right. Ben's very quiet. He's not really responding." I said, "Lay him down. I'll be right there." And I knew. The God that I served my whole life told me, "I'm coming for him. It's his time." We learned later that he had said to his mom and a couple of others something along these lines: "It's okay." He told me I don't have to strive anymore.
That Saturday, that day before, he said that to me.
I don't have to strive anymore. He was ready to rest.
So what sustained you over the years? These are some hard years. What sustained you then? What sustains you now?
One thing I'll say as far as over the years is that Dav came up with the word, and it became our family's lifeline, if you will, is that we just decided that we would choose joy. And so he coined it joyology. It's a theology on joy. And that
joyology,
really,
that's great.
yeah. I have stole it from many messages that I see and should give him creds for it, which I just did.
You just, well.
But yeah, that became to just even for some ways, just not so much just to survive, but and sometimes it felt like that. Like we're choosing joy, not funny, not pretend, not let's put on a show, but just on purpose, choosing, which is trust as well, like choosing trust.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so I would say that would be something that sustained over those years.
Our family loved the movie Incredibles and the kids were very, very small when it came out. And so we just sort of adopted that family as that was us.
Yeah.
And even Ben, who wanted to run fast, but couldn't.
Yeah.
All of that. But in one of the lines in that movie, there's something to this effect. And she says one of these two words, but they both work and we both say it. She looks at the daughter and she says, "Doubt is a luxury we can't afford." Fear. Doubt, despair, those were luxuries we chose not to afford. And so we didn't pretend our pain away.
No.
But we would sometimes on the way to school with the kids when they were little, all of us together, before we took the exit to take them to their little private Christian school, we'd say, "Okay, 30 seconds, let's do it." And we would all laugh on purpose. All the whole van. As silly as that sounds, but we were just doing it. I said, "Let's do it. We're going to worship Jesus. Let's all just laugh."
Yeah.
And we would, and we'd laugh our heads off. And people might say, "Well, that's crazy." Well, I'll tell you what, you come into our home for the last 2 decades and you will find a place of peace. You will find a place where people are kind and there's lots of hilarity and jocularness and jokes and days of great pain, but we were able to sustain those days and go through those days because we were strengthened by our decision to rejoice and to be thankful for whatever we could see. And what we did know was more important than what we didn't know. And so we gave thanks.
Yeah. And we really began to make our home a place where testimonies mattered. So we'd read them from when the kids were young, books on testimonies and miracles and foster that in our home. That was the medicine that we medicated our home with.
Sometimes through individuals, sometimes it's community, sometimes in silence, God meets us. How did or how does God meet you in your grief?
It's hard in grief.
I think early on, I'll say our people were very present with physical things. And it sounds so silly. Like I remember this, again, judge me or don't. I cried when the meal train was done.
Yeah.
Because that simple but ginormous act of love was really meaningful in those first weeks, and porch drop-offs and things like that. So in that sense, I guess, like I think you said, community, that really spoke volumes. The feeling that we were surrounded there, that beginning part. And then it's just hard.
So what has life looked like since Ben's passing? How are your other 3 children navigating this journey?
Our kids are amazing. They increasingly, over time, have opened up a greater degree of vulnerability. As their dad, I think I wanted them to be 100% articulate and express with clarity their vulnerability immediately. And I would ask them and they would kind of get quiet and I would think, what's wrong? Why aren't they saying things more? I mean, I wouldn't say that to them, but I would wonder in my head. But over the months, when I say I'm delighted, it's because the way I communicate, I tell my kids, I can't see you unless you're talking, unless you're telling me what's happening and how you feel. That's how dad sees. And so over the months, like our youngest, just a number of weeks ago, had never said this sentence out loud. We were talking about Ben and we were reading from his book. And I said, how do you feel when you hear this book? He said, I like Ben's words. And I said, yeah. And then he took a breath and we'd never heard this. He's 16 years old. He lost his brother at 15. When Ben died, my youngest boy just collapsed on the ground and beat his head with his fists. He didn't say anything. He just pounded his head with his fists as I held him. And then months later, sitting on my couch, he looks at me and he says, Ben was my best friend and he's gone and it really hurts. And I never heard him say that before. And it was so simple. You'd think, well, why? And then he broke real hard and we all did. So my kids are doing amazing. They love Jesus. They love each other so much. They love their brother-in-law. They love each other. They have an absolute uproarious blast together. And they miss their brother.
Yeah. Yeah. Each differently.
My daughter and he were the closest in age. They spent the most time together. And so it's probably harder on my daughter.
Do you think this loss has changed the way you pastor or the way you preach, the way you walk with others and their suffering?
Only when I talk about loss do I slow down a little bit. I'll tell you, yeah, when I talk about loss, it's helped me to identify with people. But also, it's changed my Easter theology a little bit. Usually, traditionally, we treat Easter like a big evangelistic service, right? Of course it is. But as I slowly was teaching through the resurrection stories, the next year after Ben passed, I'm teaching through this and I'm hearing Jesus specifically tell people to go and tell those who would most grieve his absence that he was alive. And I'm hearing that. So I would tell people, I said, I think Easter, among other things, is for the hurting. Easter is for those who have experienced loss and have tasted the sting of death. And Easter reminds us that death is not final. Mm-hmm. And that we have cast our hope entirely on the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Mm-hmm. So in that way, it has shaped.
Yeah.
For parents walking a similar road right now, is there something you wish someone had told you?
Oh, I think several things. Gosh, I think the first thing I would say is to give, especially if you are, for me, I'm a church girl. And so I had a wrong view, if you will, of grief. I almost felt, especially like early on when I first lost my dad, that it was a lack of faith to grieve, which is so not true. And so if you're anywhere in that spectrum of feeling like I can't be mad at God or I can't be angry, I invite you to read the Psalms. David's life was a permission for me, if you will, reading his words and his mood swings and his groanings gave permission for me, a church girl who felt that I couldn't, that just meant I didn't have faith. So I think give yourself permission and know that he's not afraid of your grief. He's not afraid of your tears. He's not afraid of you hollering.
Yeah.
And that's something even still, I would say I have to remind myself that it's okay for that. And I would say that. And then I'd also just say, I'm so sorry. It's really the worst thing ever.
Yeah, those are really good. And then the thing that people probably may not need to hear, but I think I felt as an assignment as dad was get your family together, do everything you can, love each other deeply, stay close, get together, be in proximity, and love on purpose. Oh my gosh, even in the way you talk, Rick, you know this, but when things get emotionally heated and there's confusion and someone doesn't put the lid back on the milk jug, suddenly someone loses their mind over a milk jug. And you think, what's happening? We just proactively, by the grace of God, we just sought to prevent any strife or hardness of speech or feeling. And I was kind of the police with that. Not that there ever was. I mean, probably my kids would think, Dad, you're kind of a freak. Like I would like, hey, none of that, and they're just really almost just having fun. But we protected peace so much. And that's Ephesians 4, we did everything to protect that peace. And we love each other deeply and then hang on.
Yeah.
If Ben's life could speak into someone else's hard season, what would you hope that they would hear?
Sounds almost pedantic, but don't give up. Ben never did. He never gave up. And he had so many opportunities. Just don't give up. Just
There's a way to live.
and Ben on purpose fed his mind with the word, worship. Oh man, that boy in worship. He would make playlists to edify himself. And then I would also say, as a plug, but more importantly, just a really great thing is we put Ben's journaling into a book. And his journaling it's the faith of Benjamin Allen Davenport. And that really is. He kept his faith on.
Yeah. He would say things like this, Dad, I'm almost tempted to stop praying for the president. And like most people aren't even trying to pray for the president that they don't like. He was tempted to stop praying. He really took all this stuff seriously while his body's degenerating, while pain is slowly increasing in his body. One of the things that he and I would talk about was, I say, Ben, look, what we can do is when we're hurting like this physically, let's just redirect it. If you're hurting physically and we can't fix it, let's turn it around, ask the Lord to put somebody on our hearts. Let's pray for somebody, send somebody a message, do whatever. And that's a lot that's in his book, but there's my goodness sakes, there's probably a whole nother book that we could collect of people sending us messages saying, I was having a hard day, I was this, I was that, things were going on, and I got a message from Ben. His memorial service, one guy called him a sniper.
Yeah.
Guys, this is helpful.
Thank you.
I want to say it's good.
Talk about Ben.
I want to say it's good, but it is good.
Yeah.
But it just feels like it's hard too.
That's a wrap on another insightful episode with Dr. Dav. If today's conversation was meaningful, would you share it with a friend and help spread the word? For more information about Heritage, visit our website at heritagenw.org. Grace and peace to you in the mighty name of Jesus.